Tonight's event is being sponsored by the Sare for President's campaign, together with the Vega for Congress campaign. We welcome the several other independent candidates that we expect to hear from tonight. We want to just say that the views that each expresses are their own, and their appearance here does not equate to complete agreement with, or indeed significant disagreement with, their views. As happened 250 years ago, this is a time when a new group of leaders must emerge from the United States. Since it is possible that the United States might not even survive this year, its 250th birthday, that new leadership must step forward now in the footsteps of the revolutionary spirit of 250 years past. Independent congressional candidates Jose Vega, Brian McGinnis, and Anthony Aguilar, Congress and Senate, an independent candidate for President Diane Sare, call on the nation, particularly former members of the United States military, to form a nationwide independent candidates for peace through development movement. They are soon to be joined by others, and this is the only efficient way to combine the creative, nonviolent, direct action methods of the American Civil Rights Movement with responsible action to be taken now by those in the Pentagon or retired military services. These patriotic men and women should come forward now, denounce this unjust, potentially civilization-ending criminal war process in Southwest Asia, and demand, with regard to sections of the American military's Christian Zionism motivation of the current Iran war, the enforcement of the separation of church and state, as discussed in the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of our Constitution, which states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, all aspects of that First Amendment are presently going to be utilized by the persons on this platform and utilized vigorously. But of course, people have heard about the kill in the name of Jesus sentiments that have been being foisted upon people in the American military that did not sign up to do that. Tonight commemorates the 250th anniversary of the Siege of Boston, as I previously referenced, and the victory of the American colonists over the British Royal Navy, who were forced to evacuate Boston Harbor under threat of annihilation on St. Patrick's Day, March 17, 1776. Now, some 50 years ago, exactly half a century ago, several people associated with the late economist and statesman Lyndon LaRouche produced, starting in 1976, and subsequent years, a series of books. They included The Political Economy of the American Revolution, How the Nation Was Won, America's Untold Story, 1630 to 1754, Treason in America, and The Civil War in the American System, America's War with Britain, 1860 to 1876. We want to just take a moment to recognize the now deceased authors of some of those books, including the late Nancy Spanis, co-author of The Political Economy of the American Revolution, W. Allen Salisbury, author of The Civil War in the American System. That's him with his favorite person, Edgar Poe, among writers, and H. Graham Lowry, author of How the Nation Was Won. And I just want to take a moment to say something about Graham, who was a very close friend of mine, who died in 2003. And of Graham, the late economist and statesman Lyndon LaRouche said, quote, such historians are the soul of the political intelligence profession, the indispensable inspiration of the conscience of the true statesman. To serve those ends, the true historian's challenge is to bring history to life as it actually was. As such, among the greatest classical dramatists and historians, such as Friedrich Schiller did. So the true historian brings belated justice to the sufferings and achievements of the past. He or she breathes life into a moment taken from the simultaneity of eternity. As I know from his state of mind, from my discussions of this work with Graham himself, his approach in writing his celebrated book was just that. Now, if you've just joined us tonight, You've done so because you were prepared to look at what some people are mistakenly calling current events and look at them from a higher standpoint, that of current history. We believe that the power of the people of the United States, the fourth branch of government, has yet to be seen. And it is our responsibility as members of that fourth branch to bring that power to light. So I'd like to now turn this over to my co-moderator, Garland Nixon. Garland, you're there? The ship is yours.
All right. Hope everybody can hear me. All right.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Very important times, as you know. Look, Donald Trump, I think, was asked earlier today, and he said something about the Israelis are not going to use nukes. Yeah, well, I don't trust Donald Trump much. But what we have to do is we've got to move forward. We've got to, as my mother used to say, live as though you're going to live for one day and also live as though you're going to live for 1,000 years. We have to work hard today to make sure that we interdict this horrible and brutal conflict that's going on and very dangerous. But also, we have to look to the future so that and we have to believe that there will be a tomorrow, and when that comes, that we'll be able to get some people in office, that we'll be able to get some people that'll be able to do more than just scream and bang on the table. Diane Sare is going to be one of them. But Diane, you're going to enter our first. You're going to talk a little bit and then intro our first guest, Diane Sare. Oh,
there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Garland. I have written a statement, which I think I'm just going to read. So far, I know myself, Jose, Brian McGinnis, and hopefully Tony Aguilar endorse this, and I'm hoping the other candidates who are on will also for mass distribution. It's called, "Is the Epstein class planning a new 9/11 to justify dropping a nuclear bomb? Will your neighbor be fooled again?" We, the undersigned candidates for public office, call on the American people to act before the attempted regime change assault on Iran leads to irreversible consequences. We are entering the third week of the illegal, unprovoked U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran, an attack launched without a declaration of war, without a congressional vote, and without a clearly defined objective. We do not know how many people have been killed or how much damage has been done because the censorship is unprecedented. We do know that it was an American Tomahawk missile that struck a girls' elementary school, killing 168 students and 14 teachers and staff. The U.S. government is admitting that 13 Americans have died so far. Both houses of Congress have failed the American people by refusing to uphold their constitutionally mandated duty under Article 1, Section 8 to determine whether or not to declare war. Every congressman who voted against enforcing the war powers resolution should be thrown out of office. Our warrior ethos promoting Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has told us that it is unacceptable for, quote, religious fanatics to have a nuclear bomb, unquote. But the most dangerous religious fanatics who have access to a nuclear bomb at the moment are those in the United States and Israel. The Military Religious Freedom Foundation reported that when the bombing of Iran began, they received over 100 complaints from soldiers within a 48-hour period. One non-commissioned officer wrote that his leader had, quote, urged us to tell our troops that this was all part of God's divine plan and that President Trump had been anointed by Jesus Christ to carry it out, unquote. The NCO pointed out that the grin on his leader's face was particularly inappropriate and disturbing. I'll skip a bit. How many people oppose the war? I do want to say that the Democrats will not do much to stop this because, and as I write, Schumer would prefer to allow the war to continue to ensure a Republican defeat, even at the risk of nuclear war. Iran, rather than being divided and weakened and susceptible to regime change, is becoming more unified as a result of the unprovoked aggression from the United States and Israel. Why a new 9/11 could be in the works. If the price of gasoline continues to rise and more Americans are killed, both of which are likely, the American people will become more and more opposed to this military adventure. Those who fooled the mentally frail President Donald Trump into believing that this would be a quick and easy victory could be preparing a false flag terror attack to be blamed on Iran in order to stampede the American people into supporting the war they now oppose. There is increasing talk in Washington, D.C. about the possibility of using a tactical nuclear bomb, one with a lower yield, which nonetheless would open a Pandora's box of new alarming possibilities for dangerous escalation, including all-out thermonuclear world war. What would be the pretext for using a nuclear bomb? We are particularly alarmed by an op-ed published this week in The Hill by Harlan Ullman of the Atlantic Council, a key architect of the shock and awe doctrine in Iraq. He argues that conventional strategic bombing will not force Iran to surrender, and said, quote, only once in history has strategic bombing forced surrender, unquote, at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then I say the Iran war must stop now. We find it tragic that in 2026, when our nation should be celebrating the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence from the British Empire, we are instead threatening to bring on nuclear Armageddon and the end of civilization in the spirit of the very British Empire from which we intended to liberate ourselves. One way of bringing a halt to this war madness would be for criminal investigations to begin of the prominent individuals whose names appear multiple times in the Epstein files, including those who have already resigned from their affiliated institutions in order to avoid further scrutiny. The fact that over a dozen women who were teenage victims of sexual abuse and violence perpetrated by Epstein and his clients, many of whom are profiting from this war, have still not been interviewed by anyone at the Department of Justice for follow-up investigation indicates that the Epstein class is running the US government. We, the people, need to take back our nation. The Iran war must stop now. If our government will not cease this criminal war of aggression, we, the people, must change our government. And to that end, I will say that on Wednesday, I will be joined with two people who actually are on tonight, Tony Aguilar, who is also running for Congress, and Colleen Rowley, who herself is an FBI whistleblower around the case of 9/11, because at this point, it seems to me Congress has failed. They're not going to act. They voted in a majority that they don't even care to uphold their job, which is whether or not to declare war. So they're not going to stop this. That's clear. Trump, as far as I can tell, is delusional. He posts things on Truth Social like, I was surprised that Iran was striking American military bases in the region. Why would that, even if you weren't briefed by your intelligence and military people, which I'm sure he has been, whether he disregards it, would you not expect that if you're launching missiles at a country from a military base, that makes that base a legitimate target of that country? Why would that be surprising? He seems to actually believe what he is saying, and he is surrounded by people like Pete Hegseth, who was a religious fanatic, or I'd say cult fanatic. It's not really a religion in the sense of anything moral. And Marco Rubio, who you remember told Tucker Carlson he had no idea that Iran had 90 million people, and he didn't know what kinds of people lived in Iran, and he didn't think that was relevant. Jared Kushner, who was a pompous idiot. I don't believe that this will necessarily stop. I don't think we can trust it, not those of us in the political sphere. It's as if you had a 3-year-old who were going to run across a street And you could say, well, it's unlucky that an 18-wheeler is going to come and smash this child. That's not the job. The leaders of our nation are required to ensure that the American people and the world is safe. And therefore, what we're going to be doing on Wednesday, besides a mass circulation of this leaflet, which will be available on my website by tomorrow, is a press conference Wednesday at 5 to call for people. Tony reported that there were several other people who left the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They didn't do so publicly. His leaving publicly, frankly, was probably the major thing that caused that to be shut down, because it became such a scandal. We need people on the inside who will stand up, who will tell the truth about the lunacy, the impaired mental state of the president, who will make it possible to stop this descent into madness. And no amount of death is acceptable. Too many people have already died. We've tolerated a genocide in Gaza for over 2 years. And apparently, a lot of people think it's acceptable to have a bunch of pedophiles making policy in this nation. I don't, and I hope other people will join me. So that's what I have to say. And that being said, I would like to introduce my friend, an actual warrior, unlike Pete Hegseth, for truth, former UN weapons inspector, Marine intelligence officer, expert in arms control, Scott Ritter, who can give us a more accurate picture than I can about the actual situation on the ground. Scott, thanks for joining us. And you're muted.
There, now unmute.
Yeah.
It's probably having guys over the age of 60 around technology. It's a recipe for disaster. But thank you very much for inviting me. Let me just correct the record. I can't give you ground truth because I'm not on the ground. I mean, that's one of the problems, is that we're dealing with this from a long distance, and we're a prisoner to the data that that is publicly available. What I can do is provide an expert's ability to sift through data and connect the dots based upon years of experience in war fighting, planning operations such as this, and frankly speaking, working on the inside, watching the U.S. government lie their teeth off about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The war that we are fighting today with Iran, first of all, is an unnecessary war. It's a war that lacks any justification whatsoever. The one potentially justifiable trigger for war, the threat of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon, first of all, has been mooted by the Director of National Intelligence, who briefed the United States Congress last year that Iran is not seeking nuclear bomb. And we've known this for years. The CIA has, for years now, come out, I think since 2007, come out with consistent national intelligence estimates that say Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon. The entire joint comprehensive plan of action that was put into motion by President Barack Obama is premised on the notion that Iran's military dimensions were investigated and found not to be linked to a nuclear weapon. We also know through forensic investigation of documents provided by Israel that the Israelis have forged intelligence that they were using. Since 2004, Israel has been providing a stream of forged intelligence to the international community and to the United States, trying to back up their assertions that Iran was pursuing a nuclear weapon. So we can clearly say that the whole specter of an Iranian nuclear weapon is a fabrication of Israeli intelligence, that the United States intelligence doesn't accept it. But American politicians have proven themselves to be vulnerable to being pressured by Israelis. None more so than President Donald Trump, who, in his first term, was briefed by Benjamin Netanyahu on intelligence that we now know is fabricated, and immediately said that the United States is going to quit the Iran nuclear deal, and that sets us on path towards where we are today. But we also know that this isn't about nuclear weapons because the Iranians did agree to sit down at the table. and engage in negotiations. And according to all the information that's come out, the deal that they struck with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner was a comprehensive deal that would have closed forever, no sunset clauses, nothing of that nature, forever, a potential path to a nuclear weapon should Iran have wanted to go that way, which they don't. And I'll say this too, I met with the Iranian president and the foreign minister last September, and I specifically asked questions about their missile program and a nuclear weapon. And the president and the foreign minister were quite clear. Iran has no desire to have a nuclear weapon. They don't need a nuclear weapon. Their ballistic missile program, the conventional military deterrence, is sufficient to achieve whatever outcomes they would need to achieve if attacked. But furthermore, they said, we're religiously prevented. Even if we wanted to pursue it, we couldn't, because the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, Ali Khamenei, had passed a fatwa in 2003, modified several times since then, that said no to nuclear weapons. So, we know that there was no legitimate trigger for this war. Diane, when you talked about justification for this war, yes, we know that there was no congressional action. There was also no action by the Security Council of the United Nations, and we are still bound by the United Nations Charter. We are signatories to that. The Senate has ratified the charter, and we can't go to war without either having been attacked, or declaring the need for preemption, which I can get to in a second, or getting a Chapter 7 resolution to justify the use of military force. There is no Chapter 7 resolution. We didn't even try. And the case for preemption that the Trump administration has made has not been articulated, in accordance with Article 51, where you could make a case for the necessity of preemptive self-defense. But then you'd have to cite the Caroline affair, which is the go-to legal precedent. The threat has to be imminent, and there can be no other ways to deal with the threat. So if we're going to say the threat was imminent, but we're negotiating with the Iranians, we immediately nullify whatever case we're made. The bottom line is there is no legal justification, which means what we are doing in Iran today is an illegal war of aggression. And an illegal war of aggression, of course, is the greatest war crime. That's not Scott Ritter's assessment. That's the assessment of Justice Jackson, who was the lead prosecutor at Nuremberg. The greatest war crime is an illegal war of aggression, or a war of aggression. From this, all other crimes are committed. And so here we have the United States engaged in an illegal war of aggression, and we have committed horrific crimes. We know this. We were complicit in the assassination, the murder of Ali Khamenei. Now we just to talk about nuclear weapons. The man who said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, the man who passed a fatwa that said there will be no nuclear weapon, the man who was blocking any potential for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, was murdered by Israel and the United States on the first day of the conflict. That shows just how crazy this entire thing is. And then secondly, of course, we bombed a school, or should I say we cruise missiled. We hit it with two cruise missiles. This was a byproduct of, again, the callous disregard for international law, for American law, for the law of war by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, who has renamed himself the Secretary of War. There are ways to go to war, and what we deal with in terms of targeting, every target has to be reviewed to ensure that it complies with the law of war. I personally did this in Desert Storm, making sure that every target in the target deck I was responsible for, scuds, industrial facilities, etc., was carefully screened to ensure that there was a legitimate military justification and that there was no chance of collateral damage, or that we were making sure we hit the right target. Here we is on day one of a war where every target should have been scrubbed. We hit a school that we knew was a school, because in the U.S. maps of the facility of Manab, the town of Manab, show it as a school. We've known it was a school since it became a school in 2016. We've been monitoring that situation. Look where Manab is located, on the coast of the Strait of Hormuz. We've been monitoring Manab closely for over a decade now. There's nothing that happens in Manab that we don't know about, electronically, in terms of human, visually. And so we knew this. The school was on a no-strike list. But that no-strike list was put together by military professionals who were attuned to the law of war. In order to get the shock and awe value, Pete Hegseth went ahead and opened up the targeting, brought in an artificial intelligence program that screened old intelligence data. Therefore, the fact that the school building used to be part of a larger Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command naval facility back in 2011, the computer said this is Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command, entered it into the target deck. Nobody screened it. The unit that should have screened it, the Civilian Harm and Mitigation Response Team, created in 2023, was disbanded by Pete Hegseth in March of 2025. The 10-man team in Central Command that should have screened this target, the 5-man team on 5th Fleet that should have screened it, were disbanded, removed. Nobody screened these targets. So on day one, we launched 4 cruise missiles at this facility. 2 of those cruise missiles hit a school, killing 168 children, 14 staff, including the principal who was crawling on her knees trying to gather her students when the second missile hit, terminating her life and the students along with her. This is a war crime of unbelievable proportions. This is a war crime perpetrated by a Secretary of Defense who has said, we don't want rules of engagement. We want to be lethal. His intent is clear and the results are clear. And Diane, I would encourage that when we speak of holding people to account, that Pete Hegseth be number 1 on the list, because he is a man who has disgraced the United States military, disgraced the United States, disgraced the Department of Defense, disgraced the service of anybody who's worn the uniform in the 250-year history of this country. This is a man who deliberately set our country up to commit murder. And he did. He was very successful in the murder that he committed. But this war was lost the very first missiles that hit Iran. The very first missiles killed Ali Khamenei. They were supposed to topple the regime. They can't. The regime is stronger now than ever because of the murder of Ali Khamenei. We don't understand Iran. We don't understand the nation we're fighting. We don't understand the ethos of the people. All we did is reinforce their desire to stand up strong. We murdered the children, further rallying them. But we also proved through this attack that we don't have a plan. We don't know what we're doing. We are literally bombing targets for the sake of bombing targets. We don't know what we're hitting anymore. We have now transitioned to a phase of deliberate targeting of civilian targets because we'd have nothing left to hit. That this means is we have adopted the Israeli plan of Daiwa, the Daiwa Doctrine. Daiwa is the name of a southern Beirut suburb that the Israelis targeted deliberately in 2006, saying that in order to break the will of Hezbollah, we will slaughter the Lebanese people. And they bombed this southern Beirut suburb, killing thousands of people, murdering them, genocidal type behavior. The United States of America is now engaged in similar behavior in Iran. We are striking civilian targets for the purpose of sending a message to the people of Iran: you shall not survive if you continue to support your government. We have become a nation that has joined the ranks of, sadly, nations like Nazi Germany. And we are governed by leaders who sadly have joined the ranks of people such as Adolf Hitler. If somebody takes umbrage at that, I don't really give a damn, because it's a true statement. We hung Germans by the neck until dead for committing the act of, for committing a war of aggression. And we are committing the same crime today. And we, the people of the United States of America, collectively aren't doing enough to stop this. So this is why I'm thankful for candidates like Diane, Sare, like Tony Aguilar, like Brian McGinnis, like Jose Vega and others, independent candidates who are free of the taint of partisan politics, people who believe in America, not in partisan political objectives, people who will stand up for what America represents. You know, we are not the greatest nation in the world. This is an absolute true statement. There is not a single benchmark in which the United States is number 1. Let's just be honest about it. Not even the strongest nation in the world anymore, because strength does not come from pounding civilians in the dirt. Strength comes from actually prevailing on the battlefield, and we're not prevailing on the battlefield. But we could be the best nation in the world. The thing about the Constitution of the United States of America, it gives us more potential to be good than any other nation in the world, because it is a sound document. It is a document that represents a body of law that, if implemented properly, could create a nation worthy of this Constitution. And so that's why I'm here tonight. I can't endorse any candidate, but what I can say is I endorse the notion of candidates who seek to make America great again in the truest sense of the word, not some political throwaway statement, but in terms of great as in terms of adhering to the Constitution, adhering to the values that define who we are and what we are, and making us the nation that our founding fathers envisioned when they created us that 250 years ago. Thanks again for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for that, Scott. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to Bill Ferguson, who began our program. He's in Boston. He represents many things. He represents the International Caucus of Labor Committees, an old organization that Lyndon LaRouche founded. But he's here now to issue a warning in the form of a poem. I think he's going to introduce it. So I'll let him do that part of it. So, Bill.
This is Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, in the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
Garland, back to you.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, next we have the one and only Tony Aguilar. Tony is U.S. Army, former U.S. Army Green Beret. He's a candidate for the House of Representatives in North Carolina in the 13th Congressional District. You know, for those of you who don't know, Tony was operating with a private security firm in Gaza. He was absolutely astonished and horrified at the things that he saw. And that motivated him to come back and talk about it, to come back and share a lot of things that happened. It was fantastic. He was heard far and wide around the world, and I think a lot of people felt really good that somebody that was going in there could share what was going on in the inside, and we're very, very appreciative of it. And Tony, tonight, if you could take a few minutes as everybody's watching to share, maybe a couple of things that you saw, if you got just a couple minutes, that people who really haven't heard your story or heard a few of the things you saw, if you could do that, if you just 3 or 4 minutes, and then go on. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
So what I experienced and what I witnessed in Gaza on the ground as an eyewitness were war crimes, the execution of a genocide by knowledge and wherewithal and intent, not only by the Israelis, but by the United States complicity hand in hand with not only the munitions that the IDF drops, but by the political cover, political backing, tax dollars that we provide to the Israelis to do it. And what's really shocking to me, even more so now than when I first saw it then, is that a vision that I had of what I witnessed there was that this could expand. This could expand well beyond the territory of the occupied territory of Palestine and Gaza and the West Bank, and even from the Middle East, the Levant, and West Asia, but around the world. And what we're seeing in this war that the United States is waging with Israel against Iran, which is illegal, unethical, immoral, unjustified, is exactly the throwing away or the abandonment of all international law, international order, international treaty, all red lines thrown out the window and looked the other way in Gaza are what we're now seeing in Iran. The targeting of civilian structures, the opening days of the conflict and the targeting of a school. But most importantly, what I think is the most disgusting part of this is the lack of accountability. Israelis have constantly shirked responsibility and accountability, and the United States have allowed them to do so. But now in this war, the United States is taking a cue out of that book and shirking responsibility, denying accountability. We saw that this targeting of the girls' school in Manab, as Scott eloquently laid out in great detail as to how that would have happened and why it shouldn't have, there's still been no accountability. So what I witnessed in Gaza, the genocide, the starvation, the forced displacement, all of these clear and undeniable violations of the Geneva Convention and international law are exactly what we are seeing against Iran right now, is an expansion of what we're seeing in the United States on the streets of our country. So what I witnessed and what I foresaw as a microcosm of what can happen to us in the future and what is happening is bearing true. And to me, that is very frightening. And more Americans need to stand up and take action before it is too late, because once it is too late, we will be in the same fate as what the Palestinians face. Maybe in a different land, may look different, but the goal is the same: oppression. And what we're seeing happening right now on our TVs, not only in Gaza, not only in the West Bank, not only in Venezuela, not only in Ecuador, not only in all throughout the Middle East, but especially now in Iran, is exactly that. What more evidence do we need before we stand up, rise up, and do something about it?
Thank you, Tony. And I think if people, and there may be some people that have questions or want to know more about your struggle, and also if you would just say a moment about your candidacy itself in North Carolina.
So I'm running for United States Congress, District 13 here in North Carolina. I'm running on a platform of people first. Not only do I vow to take no money from AIPAC, I take no money from any political action committee, no lobbyists, no super PACs, small PACs, local PACs, no interest groups, big or small. I'm taking money funding from no one other than grassroots, raising the money from the people so that I can continue to represent the people. And that's why I want to go to Congress. I have no desires or goals to be a quote unquote career politician. I have no desires to be a lifelong member of Congress. I want to break the paradigm of the two-party system, show America that we have a choice. Choice is not the dilemma of the two-party system. Choice is having choices. And I want to show America that we do have choices, break the paradigm, show that congressmen can serve for the people, and light the torch for the future generation to come behind me. So I'm putting it all on the line to run in this congressional race because it was an organic path from my speaking out against what I saw against Palestinians in Gaza to the point now where I have to ask myself, well, what are you going to do about it, Tony? What are you going to do other than just talk or share your opinion? What are you going to do about it? So I'm running for Congress because that's my way of doing something about it. We all have a different role. We all have different ways that we do something. This is my way of doing something about it, is to step up, run for Congress so that I can represent the American people in Congress without being corrupt, without being bought off, and without being compromised, not only by a foreign government, but by any other interest but the American people.
And that is the fourth branch of government, ladies and gentlemen. That is the idea. Just as Tony had no ambitions to be a whistleblower, because they had no ambitions to be part of a participant group in genocide, but found that he had no choice but to speak out. The fourth branch of government has no choice but to act, and that is you and me. Thank you very much, Tony. We're going to go right now to a man by the name of Jonathan Crook. He's an American storyteller, which we met, I think, 3 years ago down in Brooklyn. And he's going to give us some reflections on Evacuation Day, St. Patrick's Day, 1776, and reflections on our country today. Jonathan?
Thank you. I have a tale to tell to inspire us these days, a tale from 250 years ago, when March winds whipped across the harbor in Boston after a noble train hauled by a former bookseller and many others And by others, I don't just mean soldiers. I mean Henry Knox hauled close to 60 cannon from Fort Ticonderoga in upstate New York across the mud and muck and rivers of New York State and New England. And when they were perched upon the heights of Dorchester, the agent of the tyrant in England who ruled oppressively in America, General Howe, looked upon these cannon and thought, these Yankee doodles, they have it in for us. Why, we'd best regroup. We don't want to face the cannon and suffer all the losses we did at Bunker Hill. And thus, by the sheer presence of those cannon at Dorchester Heights, hauled by Henry Knox and many others, they frightened off those redcoats. Now, George Washington was in command up in Boston. He pulled together forces from New England in their fancy uniforms, along with those from Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, and then rallied them. He didn't pursue the British to their hiding place in Nova Scotia. Instead, he gathered to get his men, crying, "We must break camp and go to a place where the war will occur again." And thus, the men marched some 200 miles down to New York City. And there they gathered. Washington looked around and realized that if the redcoats were to come to the city, he would have a difficult time deciding where to place his various troops. But he managed to do so, even though there were many arguing about what could be done, especially against an army far better equipped, with more men, with training, against the ragtag militia, the farmers, the wheelwrights, the lawyers, the apothecaries and blacksmiths, the adventurers, the women, even the children, the formerly enslaved, the native folk, all had gathered for this cause, to overthrow a form of tyranny, to set up what many scoffed at and called mob rule, democracy. Well, once they had gathered, it wasn't long before the king sent his force. It was much like the huge force that Donald Trump just sent to take on the far weaker country of Iran. But now Washington, worried, what was he to do? Fight on for another day. Yes, he suffered losses at the Battle of Brooklyn on Long Island, but a miraculous rainstorm seemed to come, and men from Marblehead, Massachusetts, in boats, their oars muffled with cloth, their presence hidden by fog, managed to sneak across the East River under the shade of that fog, not to immediately engage an enemy whose numbers may have been superior, but no, to fight on for a cause whose virtuousness was what made them superior. No doubt when Washington was in the midst of that retreat, he worried all the more. How could he keep his men to fight another day? Many were not enrolling. Many were afraid of those allied with the king. Hessian soldiers, for example, who sometimes when those militia, those farmers turned fighters would put up their arms to surrender, they would be met with a bayonet. Now, they didn't want, at least some of them didn't want any more of that fight. And so some of them fled. But many decided, along with Washington, to hold on And even though they rather were defeated at the Battle of Long Island and forced to flee from Manhattan Island, why, sometimes the fleeing was so disjointed that Washington, in his rage, rode out into the middle of these men and began to try to physically turn them around until at last he had to be grabbed by his own guard and led away from the oncoming redcoats. Yes, and those harsh times in New York, those trying times, Washington lost all of his battles and fled. So they said he fled. But nay, it was more than even just a retreat. It was a reconvening. It was a hanging on, a clinging to the cause. Washington continued to regroup until at long and at last he had victory months after he had evacuated Boston in December in Trenton, New Jersey. But that carrying on, that reconfiguring, that always finding a way to continue the fight, let it inspire us today. Why, we may look at the times and every day we're struck with a new blow against democracy. And at times it makes us want to retreat, hide into our little sanctuaries in our little lives. But let's try to borrow a page here from George Washington and the Continental Army, and the men, the women, even the children, all who gathered together and fight on another day in any way we can. And that way we can, like Washington did when he evacuated Boston in March of 1776, we can evacuate the tyrant now in Washington, D.C. And there's a story to inspire. I thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Garland, back to you.
All right, next we have Brian McGinnis. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the name, you probably are familiar. Most of the people in the chat, most of the people watching are familiar with, current events and what's happening as far as in the fight to oppose war. And thank you, Jonathan, tyranny. And recently, Brian McGinnis, who is well, I would say former Marine, but you know what they say, once a Marine, always a Marine, who is a Marine. And you probably saw the incident where there was a gentleman who was in Congress who was standing up to voice his opposition to an illegal war. And he was grabbed, he was assaulted by both security personnel and, in fact, a member of Congress, where he was attacked and his arm was broken. Well, that was Brian McGinnis. Brian is now, so he's a Marine Corps veteran, firefighter, and an independent Green Party candidate for the U.S. Senate in North Carolina. Brian McGinnis, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Garland. Thank you so much for this. And yeah, that was one heck of a day. I was so thankful to be able to get that message out, and the way things went down were only amplified my voice and our voice, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. And I was very thankful to have Tony there with me, um, by my side, encouraging me and calling out wrong for being wrong, and voicing his strong words in support of me in spite of the senator trying to add his 2 cents physically out of his jurisdiction and all. It's so great to be here. I wanted to just give a couple comments of hope, and in this time of dire straits. After I was released from the court, I took a day with my wife and had a good time. The next day, I went and had an interview with this man named Clyde. He's a Marine veteran himself, and we walked through Arlington Hospital, or cemetery, my bad. And I was noticed 9 times, which was a new thing, being newly famous, and had nice encounters with people. and two encounters stood out. One was an officer from the Army. He was very big and strong. And he came up to us and shook his hands, and he let us know that there's a change in the officer corps and their perspective on what the reasoning for these wars are. When they meet up as officers and are talking about business, there is no more there's no more dissonance or disagreement in what the true reality and what the reasons are for these wars. They are aware and are not are all on board with the corruption in our government and what's driving us into these wars. And that's a change in the culture. And those officers are trying to take a stand to keep shit from rolling downhill to their men and women. And so that was one great learning. And then I ran into another warrant officer and her husband, who was an enlisted man. And they were just saying the same sentiments that there's a change. Most people are awake and aware of this, the unprovoked and uh, the wrong direction our elected officials are taking us. And so I just pass that along as some insights I've just recently learned. And one more thing, Clyde, the man I was doing the interview with, has started an organization called the Modern Exodus, and its goal is to unite men from America to get off the couch, to get out from behind the screens, learn some survival skills, learn some weapons handling skills. Just come and break bread. And it's a national group of people, and trying to inspire that. And it's an effort to unite us to counter this egregious government control and out of control government. And so he is making headways and building that organization. So and in these times, I just like to share those small positives that God willing will grow and continue turning the tide in this day.
Thank you very much for that, Brian. And let me just say that all of the candidates deserve your support. We're talking financially, and we're also talking about people helping in manpower. Candidate Vega is presently concluding one phase of a petitioning drive to get his name on the ballot in New York for his 15th congressional district in the Bronx. And Tony is involved in the race right now, as well as Brian. So financial contributions, I guess we can put into the chat or whatever, all of the relevant information for that. But they'll all appreciate that. Make sure that we just acknowledge that. And we will also be acknowledging a few other candidates that I understand have joined and are watching us. We're going to go now to Paul Gallagher, Economics Desk of Executive Intelligence Review. Well, that's one way you could describe Paul. Paul was also a political prisoner together with Lyndon LaRouche and others back in the 1980s and 90s. Paul and Anita both, his wife. And Paul is a poet. And Paul is going to give us some reflections on St. Patrick's Day in his own way. Paul, I think you're muted. I think.
Unmute.
Yes, you're good.
How's that? Okay.
There you go.
St. Patrick, he was not the only figure in history who was able to repulse serpents, snakes that were sent at him by his adversaries, the Brahms, the judges, as they were sometimes called, but they were pretty magical sorts. The other figure was Moses, who, with his friend Aaron, was able to deal very effectively with a whole lot of serpents that were thrown his way by an ancient Egyptian magician, a powerful one, called the Magus. So this poem is called the Magus. The Magus appeared on a deep starry night, and the praises were sung to his craft and his might. His weapons were shining like moon on the sea, though he promised that not for a war would they be. The shouts of his minions proclaimed him to be the king of the land and the lord of the sea, and vast were the lands that he claimed for his own, and the waters beyond to come under his throne. The friends of the good and the wise were dismayed at the way that the Magus so easily played on the minds of the millions, made serpents from rods, until some said this Magus could summon the gods. Then he suddenly thundered and threatened a war, and they saw all his promises dashed to the floor. The fire of his gunboats was brought into line, and the sea ran with snakes for his magical sign. But Moses and Aaron once met such a show. Magus warriors felt a mysterious blow and a halt and a weakness, commands that were vague, until there on their skins were the boils of the plague. Now his weapons still shine like the moon on the waves, but his troops cannot strike with the force that he craves. His wealth doesn't awe as he thought that it should. 'Tis the Magus brought low by the spells of the good. And I see that somebody there was trying to give me the get off the stage
No,
So,
no, go ahead.
sound, whatever that sound was.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll continue. Now, I'm sorry. Now, Outlook is trying to confuse me as well. But let me read one more, and this is about St. Patrick, and it was written 31 years ago on this day in prison. But like many comic poems, it refers to a certain number of events of that particular day. And it was a time when the head of Sinn Féin, Jerry Adams, was coming over to the United States for the first time to meet the president. And it's a tradition, as people know, that on St. Patrick's Day, the Taoiseach, the prime minister, comes to meet the president. But this was not the Taoiseach. This was the head of the opposition, Sinn Féin. And so here was the poem. They say the Irish live in bogs, but let the fool decide who made these global money pools, which late we see a slide. 'Tis London's great financial bog, don't try it with your plow. We'd nae a solid piece of turf if the British showed us how. Those British brags and British brains ne'er Patrick would allow. We'd nae a piece of turf to plant if the British showed us how. You've heard of Baring's money now, the bankers to the Queen. Each broker printed 10 times more than the bank had ever seen. And so they grew, and so they blew. They're an open sinkhole now. We'd nae have earned $1, lads, if the British showed us how. Those British brags and British brains would ne'er Patrick would allow. We'd nae have earned $1, lads, if the British showed us how. And have you seen Prince Charlie now, a-praying to the trees? He says his mum and dad did put him down upon his knees. We Irish bid them worship Christ. 'Tis 14 centuries now. We'd never have been Christians, lad, if the British showed us how. And have you heard Prince Philip to the deadly virus pray? These Windsors are true killers, sure would awe the world away, except their brood they wish to breed. no other babes allow. We'd nae have peopled nations, lads, if the British showed us how.
Okay.
They said, not quite, they said LaRouche exaggerates and throw that man in jail. But London's fool derivatives, he hit them on the nail. Deregulating Maggie is the wild extremist now. We'd nae have had a man, LaRouche, if the British showed us how. Let's throw him out and do without and do the American way. Or shall we call it Irish? For it is St. Patrick's Day. Let Jerry meet the president and a noble peace enow. We'd nae have had a president if the British showed us how.
All right.
Finis.
Thank you very much. Everybody hear me okay? I'm
Yes,
unmuted.
you're okay.
All
You're
right.
good.
Great. Next, we have the one and only Jose Vega. He's an activist, candidate for U.S. House of Representatives in New York's 15th Congressional District. And, I've had people say to me about these things. They're like, I watch them and I like them. But, Garland, no, none of these people are going to win. What are they doing? To which I say, number one, you can't win if you're not in the race. So they have an opportunity to win. As bad as things are going, as we are sprinting towards some kind of at minimal, global economic catastrophe, who knows? Within the next couple months, anybody could have a chance. So Jose Vega, he's running against a lunatic, ultra Zionist. And I think that when people get a clear understanding of Jose, of his policies, and of course, what his opposition is, I think the guy's going to have a chance. Jose Vega.
All right. I hope you can hear me okay. Yeah? All
Yes.
right, good. First of all, I just wanted to thank the people for the cultural component of this event. To be able to get American history and poetry in one event this year has truly been inspiring. And while listening to the entire composition of this panel, I had remarked earlier that it felt like a Beethoven composition because of how dynamic it is. And so I just wanted to share that and express my gratitude for everyone who has contributed something to the evening on the cultural component, and to Jonathan for that great storytelling. That was very inspiring. And I have on here on the Zoom call tonight, who people who are listening are some of our high school interns who are on, who like to poke fun at me, which is good. They say they try to keep my ego in check, so I appreciate that. But sometimes we get into discussions about American history. What is so redeeming about American history? And one of the things that we have done is read the Declaration of Independence. Because in talking about that, before we read it, often the discussion is, well, I would ask them, have they read it? They said, yeah, I think we read it once in like a high school class about, who was Thomas Jefferson and what did he mean by, all men? Did he mean all men and women? Who was he talking about? Was he talking about the slaves too? And so I said, well, wait a minute. What does it mean to you right now? Because whether you believe it or not, it's your document. Whether it was written for you or not, it's your document. So let's read it together. And it's astonishing because it's like they're reading it for the first time. And these are the people who are supposed to inherit this American project, this country. And so if there is any year in which that there is going to be a rediscovery of what this country was supposed to be and stand for, it is this year, in the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. And I often hear, well, empires die every 250 years. Okay, yeah, sure, but this isn't an empire. The United States of America is not an empire. I will die on that hill. It is acting like one right now because it has been subverted by the same forces that tried to stop the revolution 250 years ago. But it is something that exists in the minds of all of us on this call and who are watching on Garland's YouTube channel or on my X account or wherever people are watching right now. That is where America lives in your mind. Because the America that I know believed in the promotion of the general welfare, as written by Gouverneur Morris, one of the founding fathers of this country, who is from the Bronx, who is buried down at St. Mary's Church in the South Bronx, in the poorest congressional district in the country, the man who wrote the words to the preamble, the words that every single person quotes, and they don't even know who wrote it. You know, the "We the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union." That was Gouverneur Morris who wrote those words. And people don't know that he's from the Bronx. But we have a project so that makes sure that everybody in the country knows who Gouverneur Morris is as part of our 250th anniversary. And in that lens is what our campaign is truly about. I was asked, why is it the case that you're running against Richie Torres if you keep talking about other people like Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi and, the worst elements of the Republican Party? And I said, because this whole two-party system has to go. And it's not just about one individual here or there. It's about reviving a principle that every human being is created equal. And if you truly believe that, then you cannot tolerate the conditions that exist in every part of this country. And like the solution, like the real American vision, the real American image of what this country was exists in your mind, so does the problem. And the problem is that people need to get active. Because if you're just sitting here, as Brian had pointed out earlier, and you're not actually doing something, if you're not out there advocating, supporting independent candidates, then you are part of the problem. We are not spectators. We are not commentators. We are actively involved in moving and shaking current events, but not for current events, for the future, because we believe in posterity. I want a country that will be great for the people who will be born long after I'm dead. And I want poverty to be something that's studied in a textbook, in a historical textbook. And I believe that that's a reality, that is completely possible within our lifetime if we choose to make that happen this year. And I'm proud to say, as part of my campaign, our volunteers have knocked on over 17,000 doors in just the last 2.5 weeks, bringing them petitions saying that we want Jose Vega to be on the ballot because we believe that your child should have the same future, the same ability to develop their creative reason and potential as any other child, regardless of the parent's income level. And when we're going around doing that and briefing people on the war, people get, first of all, they get nervous. Oh my God, I didn't know that Richie Torres was a supporter of the war. But then they say, well, what do I do? And the first step is that people get me on the ballot, sign my name to get me on the ballot. We were telling people that I was going to be on the Jimmy Dore show just a few days ago, and we were telling people about this town hall that was coming up. So I hope that some people who signed our petition are on this Zoom call or watching on YouTube. And that is what the function of independent campaigns do. It is to wake up and mobilize people who say, I want to declare my independence from the Epstein class. And I understand there are people who work 9 to 5s who can't do much, but they contribute. Some of the best donations we've gotten are the $10, the $25 with these messages from people that say, I can't give you much, but this is what I can give you. And just know that we're rooting for you, wherever it is that they are from. And that is the spirit in which we find ourselves in right now, in a mode in which I think America is ready to declare their independence, and all of these other candidates who have decided to dedicate their lives, to sacrifice their lives for a better country. People like Brian and Tony and Josephine and Greg Stoker over in Texas, They are the ones who are leading that pathway forward. And so I just want to say that I am truly honored to be able to share this stage with all of you in declaring our independence once again from the satanic Epstein class. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Jose. And let me just say to everybody, this is the way in which, and the only way in which, you're going to see a resurrection of creative, nonviolent, direct action. It's going to come from the American military, retired members of the American military, people who have already, because of largely their commitment in war, are going to be trusted by the American people. It doesn't mean they'll be the only people. Obviously, a lot of people, anybody should be involved that feels and understands their role in this moment and in this time. In the same way that Jonathan Crook referenced Henry Knox, who was completely self-taught. He didn't know anything. He didn't go to any military school. Nathaniel Greene was the same way. Several of the other commanders and officers were self-taught in the American Revolution. And so, in the same way, we're inviting all citizens to become engaged in that, if you want to call this way, People's University or People's Academy, which is not just by running for office. It's by understanding this idea of the relationship between history, real history, intelligence, real intelligence, and what we'll call poetry. You know, there's a saying by the poet Percy Shelley said that poets were the unacknowledged legislators of the world. What we're going to do is we're going to conclude this portion with Bill Ferguson, and when we're going to then go to responses, discussions among the people who are with us tonight, introduce some of the candidates that have gotten on, and if there's some questions or other things we should address, we'll try to do that. Bill is going to do for us the Sonnet 55 by Shakespeare, and which tells us something about why poetry is more powerful than guns and fame. Bill?
Not marble, nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. But you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone besmeared with sluttish time. When wasteful war shall statues overturn, and broils root out the work of masonry, nor Mars his sword, nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. Against death and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. Your praise shall still find room, even in the eyes of all posterity that wear this world out to the ending doom. So, till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. I'd like to say something.
Please, go ahead.
Continue. We've gone from a country where the population was steeped in Shakespeare, that was led by probably one of the greatest military leaders in U.S. history, Abraham Lincoln, who was a student of Shakespeare and insisted that his cabinet read Shakespeare. Also, the nation of the Bostonian Edgar Poe, and military veteran, West Point cadet, and a inveterate opponent of the British Empire. And this is the kind of thinking, the kind of culture that we have to revive if we're going to make our way back to the nation that can be proud of Evacuation Day. I should mention I'm about a 15-minute walk away from Dorchester Heights. So this is hitting me kind of personally. And I also, if I have a chance later, to say something about the role of Schiller in this project. Friedrich Schiller, the poet of freedom. But I'll stop here for now.
Okay, very good, very good. I think we now have a couple of announcements. Jose, I'm going to go back to you or to Diane. I think we've got a couple of other candidates on. Is that correct?
Yeah, should I? There's actually at least 4 that I know of, and I'd like them to come in here as panelists. Anastasia will send you the link. You can say hello, say who you are, where you are, what you're running for, just so people know, and be brief. And then I think we may take questions, or Jose may have more. And that's Andrew Laverdiere and Jeff Young, who are both running for state legislature in their states. Rob Ruskowski and Frankie Lozada, if you're there, and you can, as a panelist, unmute your video and show your face so people know. And people are from New York, Georgia, Maine, and Kentucky. So we've got North Carolina. Go ahead. I see Jeff is right there. Jeff, say hello, please.
Oh, all I'd like to say is that, I've been a Democrat for most of my adult life. I started running for U.S. House of Representatives in 2014 in Kentucky, from my part of Kentucky. And every time the Democratic Party would rig it against their favored candidate. And so after many such experiences, some friends and I started a new party called the Kentucky Party in 2024. And we are now running candidates for the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell's seat, which he's currently keeping warm. And the platform of the Kentucky Party is unbelievably simple compared to any other party I've ever heard of. We are pro-peace and anti-corruption, and we have a focus on Kentucky. That's the whole platform, which means that we're not interested in censoring anybody who wants to join the Kentucky Party and be a candidate. We're interested in getting you on the ballot and getting the signatures needed and helping you work through this process of running for office. I'm running for the Kentucky House of Representatives this year. I set my sights a lot lower. I had run for the U.S. House several times and governor of Kentucky 3 times over the last 12 years. But I'm going for the Kentucky House because it is the people's house. It is where legislation begins. And I have a lot of ideas living in Kentucky for the last 44 years I've lived here. A lot of ideas about how the Kentucky government can be reorganized and become less corrupt, especially corruption among the judges, the judicial branch. So in Kentucky and in the United States as a whole, I think of the 3 branches of government, legislature, executive branch, and the judiciary, the judges are the most corrupt right now. They routinely throw out cases that are meritorious before even allowing any discovery, and that makes justice impossible. So if I get elected to the Kentucky House, I'll be going for judicial reform and reducing the power of our judges and making them obey the law and the Constitution.
Great, thank you. And you had a billboard that said abolish the CIA, I recall, which was
Yeah, that's right. One of my
useful.
first elections, I think it was 2014 or
Wow.
2016,
Okay.
I think. 2016, I had that billboard. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that got a lot of attention. I actually won the Democratic primary for the U.S. House one time in 2022.
Yes.
And the entire Democratic Party in my county, in my district, and statewide supported the Republican incumbent and supported a write-in Democrat
Great.
to take votes away from me. I still got 35% of the vote on general election day, but the entire party united against me. And that led to my helping to form the Kentucky Party, which has no primaries. You know, we don't have enough people to have a primary.
Right. Thanks. We're going to quickly go to Rob, I guess, Ruskowski,
Sure.
Georgia. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I just have to say I am just so honored to be a part of this. I wasn't even aware the extent of this meeting, and listening to everything and listening to everybody, it's really touched my heart. I'm running currently. Actually, I was in a special election that just happened on March 10th. Unfortunately, I didn't win. There's a runoff going on right now in Georgia's 14th congressional district. That's the former seat of Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's going to be determined on April 7th. Georgia is a very, very difficult place to run, probably the most difficult with ballot access in the entire country. And unfortunately, when I went to register, I was under the assumption that there wasn't going to be a fee and that I would just have to get signatures. And there ended up being a $5,220 fee I wasn't prepared to pay. So I'm going to be a write-in candidate for this year for November. And I'm strategizing, and I have done my homework. There has never been a write-in candidate to win in Georgia. There actually has never been anyone to get signatures to get on the ballot that has won. And the research I've done, only five people total, 5 independents, and the last one was back in like 1963, when the law was changed in 1943, and nobody, only 5 people have ever made it onto the ballot in Georgia with getting signatures, because it's so high and the money is so high. But my website is rushcongress.com. I've joined an organization called the Independent Candidate Network at independentcandidatenetwork.com that is trying to organize a way to fundraise for independents across the entire country. It is only focusing in on Congress right now, the House of Representatives, to change the House. But I am totally on board with the message with this group, and will spread it as far and wide as I possibly can. I know my particular situation. I'm going to work as hard as I can to get into Congress. But at the same token, I'm going to spread the message so that I can get as many other independent candidates into Congress as well. But we really, truly need everyone's support out there. We can't win if people think that we're not winnable. We can win. That's the biggest hurdle, is that people just don't think, they want to vote for the lesser of two evils, and we keep getting evil, and that has to stop. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this program.
Thanks for joining. I guess Andrew Laverdia wasn't able to get on here, but Frank Lozada is there. Hi, Frank. And then we'll quick go to Q&A or more. I see Scott is still with us and awake. So
Oh, good. Scott is still there. I have a question for him. So
good. Okay, Frank, you go ahead.
Thanks, Diane. I'm Frankie Lozada. I'm running in New York. Can you guys hear me, by the way? So I'm trying my new microphone. Perfect. I'm running in New York's 4th congressional district against Laura Gillen, who has been published multiple times now as the most vulnerable seat in Congress in the entire country. She's one of the 7 Democrats that voted for the Big Beautiful Bill to funding of ICE. She's pro-war. She's also received $1 million in AIPAC money. So I have not. I am refusing, obviously. I am the pro-peace candidate, and that's why it's very refreshing to be in a group with everyone who has those same values, that wants the better for the general good. It's pretty much the race here. We're in the petitioning season. Community support has been very in favor of new faces in that seat. And even the local parties, despite the county endorsing her, have been very hesitant on making their own personal official endorsement. So it's a very winnable seat. I, like myself, are going to get challenged on every signature, I'm sure, just like Jose Vega is going to be, because Jose's out there making noise. So good job, Jose. Um, I'm really hoping he takes that down and makes a dent into Richie Torres's pride, for, just for all that he's done. And yeah, I mean, keep up the good work, everyone. It's a grind out there. And just remember, I know it's going to be very exhausting. It's just the beginning portions of campaigning, but try to stick with it on even some of the darkest days. Remember why you're out there, who you're representing, and sometimes when you need to just chat up with some of your constituents. You know, they're there to support you.
Great. Thank you. Dennis,
Okay.
I think it's back to you.
Okay, great. So yeah, so here's my question. It's a question for both Scott and if Tony Aguilar is also there as well. Differently, I think we know from Brian McGinnis how he thinks about things. But Scott, you have been the subject of all sorts of attempts to break you and stop you. You played a very notable role with respect to Diane Sare in particular back in 2022 when there was a kill list that you made sure was identified as a kill list, which was being circulated by some people out of Ukraine, who've also recently even threatened Orban of Hungary. And at the same time, you've also often proposed various actions, including demonstrations, especially when people don't try to exclude you from participating in them. And I also referenced Tony here because you guys are guys who really were in the system, deep in the system. And like a few people back in the 70s, a few, one notably a guy named Donald Duncan, who back in 1965, he was a Green Beret. He had served in Vietnam and famously came home and he appeared on the cover of a magazine called Ramparts at the time. And all it said was, "I quit." And he told his story about what the war was really about. And what actually happened with the opposition to the war in Vietnam was it was those first guys from the military who served, or some of whom refused to serve and served time because of that. Those were the people who actually paid the original price and actually precipitated the move against the war in Vietnam, along with Vietnam veterans who came back later. So I just wanted you to get a chance to say something because you have also emphasized, as have we in this whole thing, and that's why we are getting these candidates, and you see the idea that the people have to get up off their hind legs and do something and not wait for the institutions. You've seen it from the inside and have obviously made your choice. So I just wanted you to take an opportunity to say a bit more about your own situation. Obviously, as much as you want to say, and about what it takes to fight back so people understand the way they've got to think, why we have this idea about Washington and why we're talking about fighting against odds and having an idea of victory.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Look, I'll just keep it really, really simple. I believe in the Constitution of the United States of America. That's what grounds me. That's what I took an oath to. And I believe I believe in the institutions that are derived from the Constitution. I'm not an outsider. I'm an insider. An insider meaning I'm in the Constitution, all in. The Constitution belongs to we, the people of the United States of America, and that's the message I try to send to people. I hesitate about demonstrations, and I also hesitate about some opposition because it seems people are when they reject failed policies, which they have every right to do, they seem to be rejecting institutions. We don't reject the presidency. We embrace the presidency. We don't reject Congress. We embrace Congress. We don't reject the judiciary. We embrace the judiciary because that is us. That is what the Constitution says we are, who and what we are. We just need to make these institutions better. We can't allow these institutions to operate on automatic. because those institutions don't exist if they operate on automatic the way our founding fathers intended them to exist. We, the people of the United States of America, must hold those whom we elect to higher office accountable for what they do in our name. In order to do that, we must be empowered with knowledge and information, but we also must be motivated by our civic responsibility to the institutions of government. I don't reject America. I embrace America. I defend America. And America is defined by the Constitution of the United States. People say, where do you get your strength from or whatever? The strength comes from the Constitution because it's the right thing to do. And when I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I was prepared to lay my life down. Do you understand what that means? There's not a damn thing anybody can do to me to make me yield from that path, because I'm willing to die for that. And it's not just rhetorical. I'm willing to lay my life down for my country. And every American citizen should be willing to do the same thing. I'm not talking about needless sacrifice or suicide. I'm talking about standing up and fighting for that which defines who we are and what we are. If we don't defend the Constitution, we are nothing. Don't call yourself an American if you don't know what the constitutional republic is, because that's all we are. We're not anything different from that. Anybody who says they want to do something different from that, you're not an American. An American is somebody who believes in the constitutional republic. That's it. And so that's what motivates me every day when I get up. How do I defend this republic? How do I defend the Constitution? And how do I motivate people to be part of this defense? I'm not anti-American. There's a lot of people out there. You sure sound like you're anti-American. No, I'm the most pro-American person you ever met in your life. But I believe in America, the United States of America, as set forth by the only thing that defines who and what we are, and that's the Constitution. There's a scene from a movie, Bridge of Spies, and it's Tom Hanks confronting this CIA guy that wants to get him to do something, to get able to confess or not to defend him properly. And Hanks, says, "What's your last name?" The guy says, "It's a Germanic name." And he says, "Well, I'm an Irishman." He says, "What do we have in common?" The answer is nothing, not a damn thing. The only thing an Irishman and a German have in common in America is the Constitution, the rule book. The rule book defines who we are. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what your ethnicity is, your religion, your gender. I don't care. If you believe in the rule book, then we're on the same side. And that's what I encourage people to do. Embrace the rule book. And the rule book is the Constitution of the United States of America. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Scott. Thank you very, very much for that. Is Tony with us still? Tony Aguilar? Yeah, Tony, if you have anything you'd like to say, go ahead.
Well, I share the same thoughts and feelings and beliefs that Scott does, that in standing up for what's right, though it may not always be popular, to risk and put your life on the line for our country, meaning its Constitution and what we stand for, not what's popular or what gains people's attention, but what's right is what we should all stand for and defend. And, when I was arrested in Congress on the 3rd of September, I stood up and I held up a copy of the Constitution of the United States. And I held it up and I said, "You have an oath to this Constitution and you are not living by it." And simply that's what I'm demanding from our Congress, from our administration, is to abide by the Constitution to which we all took an oath. The oath that Scott mentioned, every officer that serves in the government, whether you're Department of State, Department of Defense, a military officer in uniform, or an officer in the cabinet, you swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Our founders wrote that, domestic, in that oath, because it is recognized that at times you must defend from within of what the threat may be. And I think now more than ever, if you look at the comments of our Secretary of Defense, the comments of our president, who call war fun, who call killing fun, who say that use of our military is at their disposal, hold no quarter, committing war crimes, holding us all liable for that, is not what our country and our Constitution stands for. And I share the same sentiment and feeling again with Scott that I am not anti-American. I am pro-American. And being pro-American means I stand by the values of our Constitution. And in looking at what we face right now, this is the time, I cannot recall who wrote it, but now is not the time for sunshine patriots who want to come out of the woodwork when things are great. Now is the time for those that care, that truly care about the purpose and the foundation of our country and our Constitution and Republic, to stand firm, knowing that there's risk. Now is not the time for those that want to only stand up when it's easy. Freedom is not a spectator sport. And now we must all stand up and do something. It's time to stand and deliver, so to speak. So, again, that's why I'm running for Congress, because I feel that I have to do my part. I have to stand and do something, not just admire the problem.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think what we can do now is this. Garland, you're still with us there, right?
Yeah, he's there.
Yes, I am.
Okay, fine, because you actually haven't had any chance to make a few comments. I think we'll take something from you, and then I think we are going to move to a conclusion. So why don't you go, Garland?
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I think what we're doing is very, very important here. I think it's important because people are without, there are a lot of people that are without hope right now. And I understand why, because there were a lot of people that voted for Trump and some that didn't vote for Trump who thought, well, I've heard his speeches and he said, I'm going to get rid of the neocons, vote for me, and I specifically won't start a war with Iran, etc. And after having gone through, president after president, hope and change, I'm with her, build back better. There's always a new poll-tested slogan. I think a lot of people have thrown in the towel and given up. And people talk about the end of the U.S. project, empire, or whatever. Well, it isn't necessarily the end. Necessarily the end. I think there are people in here that look at it as a beginning. Things have kind of like this. If you've ever had a friend or a family member who has a uh, a problem with substances, you can see them spinning out of control. And they're going to hit rock bottom, and there's nothing you can do to tell them, oh, don't invade this country, don't attack this country, don't, ship bombs over here. They're never going to listen. And you see them spinning out of control. But oftentimes, sadly enough, they can't get an opportunity to come back up until they hit rock bottom. And I feel like right now, based on what's happening, we've hit rock bottom politically, we've hit rock bottom militarily, we've hit rock bottom in so many ways morally with a genocide. We've hit rock bottom as a nation. And we can look at that as a horrible thing, or we can look at that as an opportunity for, when people hit rock bottom, they can no longer deny the problem. And I think there's a lot of people out here who are feeling horrible. They can't deny the problem anymore, and they feel disheartened and hopeless. And that there are people in this room who are saying, don't feel hopeless. And if you listen to what some of the candidates or what the candidates are saying, and you listen to the people here who are doing poetry and things like that, I think you hear hope. I think you hear a positivity, and I think you hear, what, let's get up off the mat. Let's not lay here. Let's not say, well, that's it. Our economy's destroyed. Everything's destroyed. Let's say, let's get up off the mat. Let's do things right. Let's put a new generation. And I don't mean a new generation from the perspective of age. I mean a new generation from the perspective of how we view the world and what the United States should be. Let's get a new generation of people in power so we can take this thing in the direction it is supposed to be. And so we can say, the alcoholic has hit rock bottom, or the waraholic has hit rock bottom, and now it's time for us to get a new group of people in here and get moving in the right direction. And I think a positive attitude is the right way, thing for us to have, and have some unity and give a vision to people out here rather than a hopeless feeling. I think present a vision how things could be, and then people start getting behind that vision, and we can make a change.
Thanks a lot for that, Garland. Let me just ask, I didn't ask Jose if he had anything finally, or Diane if you had anything finally. So Jose, let me go to you first.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank a few contributions came into my campaign site while this was going on. I want to thank you all for donating, and I just want to reemphasize the need to support independent candidates like Tony, like Brian, like myself, and of course like Diane and Jeff Young, and any other independent candidates right now. We need your support more than ever. And I'm a strong believer in the old adage that I think Dr. King had referenced. Said, look, if you can't run, walk, and if you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you got to do, you got to keep moving. And for some of you, I understand that means you can't door knock. That means you can't come out here on the streets. Well, your financial contributions are just as important because it allows us to stay out in the streets and continue to be your voice for declaring independence. So, and on top of that, I just want to give another heartfelt thanks to everybody on here for their contributions, the cultural contributions, for what Brian, Tony, Scott, and Diane, and what everyone else had to bring to the table. I want to thank each and every one of you, and for the people on the call who were making up part of my volunteer base, who helped us knock on over 17,000 doors, which we're not done, but I want to thank you all for making that a reality, and that's it for me, Dennis.
Okay, very good. Diane.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for being here, Scott in particular, and wish Scott safe travels on a particular peace mission that he is embarking on. Please remember Wednesday at 5 p.m., myself, Tony Aguilar, and Colleen Rowley on this question of popping someone else loose who can tell the truth, who can break the situation open. That's Wednesday, 5 p.m. If you sign up at sareforpresident.com, you will be sent an email about that. Also, sign up on my website or Jose's website. The leaflet that I read at the beginning, which has been endorsed by almost all the candidates here, is for mass distribution. We have to preempt anyone from even thinking of staging a false flag. And you can print it out and hand it out or circulate it on social media, but that will also be in its finished form available tomorrow. So sign up at sareforpresident.com to get on my email list and get that material. And that's what I have.
Thanks a lot for that, Diane. I would suggest actually, and we'll see whether we can work this out for either next week or the following week, we might do a session because I know a lot of people may have questions or other discussions, but also, of course, we're now finally into a situation where people are asking, what can I do? And there was a lot of what people can do tonight. There's a lot in terms of what you can do in terms of supporting the candidates. Diane's mentioned her press conference. They were talking about distributing a leaflet, which is warning of the danger of another 9/11. There's all sorts of other things with all the individual candidacies, and of course, then there's also questions that people had. I want to simply indicate something because it wouldn't be known by people generally under the age of 30, just in terms of what we're actually involved in here. What we're doing is we are retaking the concept of the American electoral process. The American electoral process has been largely hijacked for a very long period of time. It's hijacked by wealthy people. Right now you realize that people tell you, they explicitly state, you have to have $1 billion to run for the presidency of the United States. How much money do you think Abraham Lincoln had to run for the presidency of the United States? He didn't exactly come from wealth. When you're in a situation in which people are trying to tell you there's a price tag on your institutions, then that's the point at which you are required to follow what is stated in the Declaration of Independence. Whenever any government becomes destructive of the ends of the right, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to establish new government, laying its foundations upon such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall be most fit to secure their security and happiness. Sitting right there, this is a requirement for those that say they are citizens of the United States. It also says that when there is a long train of abuses and usurpations that pursue invariably the same object, it is the duty to throw off such government. But they're not talking about violent overthrow of the United States. That the United States is a revolutionary principle. The American government is the revolution, which is the American government. The Constitution is a codification of the revolution. And you're supposed to do that. That's what being an American is supposed to be all about. It's been the reversal or the removal or the moving away from that over the past half century, which has been the problem, and is the lack of action of the fourth branch of government, the people, which is the central problem in the United States. It is not the rich. Yes, the Epstein class is a bad problem. It's the corruption in which people have participating. That's where the Satanism is. It's the corruption of the people saying we can't win because. That's very convenient if you believe that. But convenience and the American identity don't go together. You're supposed to understand this is a revolutionary principle. It doesn't go by ideology, see? It's not revolutionary socialism, revolutionary communism, revolutionary whatever the hell. It's not ideological. It's a compact of the citizens with freedom. Most people, freedom is not necessarily the desire of most people. Most people like conformity more than freedom. They like to escape freedom. But the compact with freedom demands these actions on the part of the individual American. And whatever you think about people like Martin Luther King or other individuals, that is what we have to reinvent. So what we are doing here tonight, as we did last week, I've tried to now ask you to help us or request that you be involved in, is a rethinking of the entire process of self-government in the United States. We are reinventing that in our time before this country is committed to a course of action that could wipe out the entire human race. So we thank you all for joining us, but we thank you more for what you're about to do in expanding our ranks and insisting that the American people show up again on the stage of history, and that the three other branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, be held accountable by the fourth branch. That's our responsibility. So I don't know if there's other announcements we have to make. Is there anything else? Anastasia, is there anything that we need to be talking about here? We need to bring you up? Or are we good?
Well, I guess
Bring
I'm
her
always
up.
useful to bring up.
Please.
I just want to thank everybody for joining us. This was a fantastic event. Definitely make sure to go to these websites and sign up. We need all of you active. Get out there, organize. We want to cause a lot of good trouble in the world. If it requires getting an arm or two broken, that's great. We have 2 people on this panel right now with broken arms, so that's fantastic. We need more of that. They're pointing to each other. We need more of that. So please join us. You can go to Diane's sareforpresident.com. You can go to, I'm just going through the line here, votevega.nyc for Jose, brianmcginnis.org for Brian, Aguilar for Congress.com. And I posted a number of the Zoom links and whatnot. Share this stream around, but let's get active and mobilize and coordinate with all of each other. This is looking pretty fantastic. So have fun, everyone. Talk to you soon. See you all Wednesday.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.